I'm Bear Grylls, and this week I'm battling the wilderness of Missouri. Right now, I'm miles from any sort of civilization, so I have to keep my wits about me as I look for the necessities of shelter, water, and food. I find that the easiest way to remember these necessities is to call to mind the suborders of Andisols. Knowing these suborders is essential for your survival, because not only will they tell you what conditions to look for, but also what conditions to avoid. I also have to be careful with this terrain. The rocks are very unstable and they can be treacherous. These suborders are classified based on their water content and the temperatures in which they form, two aspects which you need to be especially mindful of when trying to find shelter. When looking for shelter, I always try to avoid areas that are similar to aquans, because I don't want to build my shelter in a place that is too waterlogged, that might have quicksand, where I would have no sheep carcass to help pull myself out. I also have to be very careful to avoid areas similar to vitrines, because they do not have very much water, and I can only recycle my fluids so many times. I always also compare my environment to cryons and taurins, because if I find myself in a cryon, I'll need to find some sealskin to use as insulation against the cold. But conversely, if I find that I'm in a taurin, I need to find a camel carcass for shelter against the heat. Zerins and ustens can be highly unpredictable or variable in their moisture content or their temperature regimes, so if I find myself in an environment that reflects these soil suborders, I have to be especially careful. I usually prefer to set up my shelters in environments similar to udens, because udens generally have just the perfect amount of water and exist at very comfortable temperatures. Another thing to remember about these suborders of Andisols is that each suborder can support a different form of vegetation, just as the different environments you might encounter support different forms of vegetation. And these different forms of vegetation can support different creatures. And when you're looking for creatures for food, always remember that if it has protein, protein means energy, energy means movement, and movement means survival. Now this information will serve us well, as we're still hundreds of miles from any sort of civilization.